Welcome. Hey, and thanks for tuning in. Um, Obviously, you're living in 2022, and you're living in the United States, or you're living in practically anywhere in the world. You know that there are new heads to the Hydra, new entanglements, um, new problems emerging from the state, from those in power, from those in control. Um, it is a time now for actionable communal behavior, not merely theory, not merely philosophy. To deliberate is important. We must deliberate, but we must be swift with the deliberation. And we need uh, real heroes now that have a praxis or an application. We also need people that are integral to the perennial forms, if you will, and the actionable agricultural, uh, industrial processes. We need people that can produce to produce. Um, and we need people that are able to lead others to develop and create the items that are going to reduce waste, yes, but secondarily to making certain that the form of not merely our culture, but the rudiments of our national economic and biological systems are maintained, uh, and then made optimum. And this, you know, I propose as uh, a type of, if you will, Ubermensch or leader, a wise leader should obviously take over uh, the strings of power and start moving the populace to make performative legislative appeals and demands in order to not, as Donald Trump was saying, merely drain a swamp, but to cut the heads off the Hydra. Now, a lot of politicians and our current United States Congress people, states people, our governors, they enjoy fairly large incomes for their labor. And I believe this is unwarranted. This is a type of carryover of opulence or granting statespeople, politicians, a type of opulence so that they rub shoulders with the more affluent or considered more affluent. These days need to end, and they need to end now. They need to end soon. My proposal and the means to achieve this proposal is via Convention of States. Currently, a Convention of States, if you Google it, if you see people grouping and enacting and attempting to affect state legislatures, I believe some of these motivations are well intended, they're good willed, Oftentimes they seem conservative and right wing. Democrats appear to be wailing and merely philosophizing, right? And I'm not saying you don't philosophize as a Republican. People are in dialogue all the time, sharing their thoughts on things. And only a small percentage of these conversations and these ideas are put online. I ask people to send me what they believe are the ills and then the solution that they would put forth to solve that ill, right? That's what I meant by praxis. I am and have been a candidate running for president of the United States for the last two cycles, and now this cycle for 2024. I am registered on the fec.gov site under Michael Travis Fell. What makes me qualified to do this? An artist, a broken bodied in one way. My feet are broken and surgically rebuilt. They have been healing and reforming, restabilizing, if you will, for the last decade. That has caused much great pain. This is a metaphor. It is a metaphor as well for what it means to take what one's footing is as a nation, as a body politic, and in the midst of having its form busted, having an egg at the base of the columns busted, where Leviathan heads are sprouting and nesting and maintaining. I've been noting all sorts of things in my artworks over the years, right? And that's one such thing. The despondency of the population relative to the public, what I'm hearing online, what the concerns are philosophically, politically, diving deep in making certain to bring up what I think are dark descriptions, not merely for the sake of horror, but as allegory, not merely pristine representation. I'm a troubadour. I play drums. So my point is, what makes me qualified to be president other than believing that, like a master Rubik's Cube solver, there are more practical and grounded solutions and orders to solutions that can be implemented and really must be implemented to save what is going on. Now, I have worked in major corporations. I've worked in Amazon. I have worked at JetBlue. I have worked at eBay. Each one of these are distinctive, and yet each one of these are service-oriented jobs for otherwise corporations which are trying or which facilitate commerce and transportation. I've also worked in managerial and service class positions at restaurants, at bars, at golf courses, serving the leaders, maintaining actually, and in parallel, but not in parallel any longer, with my artistic developments and drives and successes, but as a means of bringing in money for families which had not come about, meaning the different potential families they could have had with women that were unsuccessful, either aborted or overly strained beyond my youthful capacity to override the behaviors of the women that were disagreeable to the production of family or to properly communicate and be forthright with the women that were available. There's still a future there, but as of right now, as a single man, as a childless man, as a pondering, artistic man, what qualifies me to be president is my attention to the lowly, to the street people, working at food kitchens, feeding the poor, being a philanthropist, not attempting, perhaps to my own peril, to become stupendously wealthy. It would seem to be a type of antipathy to my greater artistic ambitions of maintaining a balanced relationship to my own economy, such that I had financial pressures as well as enough money to gather supplies, but enough financial pressures to focus inward on my talents, to force myself to rely upon my talents. And those have served me. I have interacted and sold street art in several cities, many cities, and in front of many people and many classes of people. I've taken a long temperature of the lowly class in the red state of Salt Lake City, the mixed class in the beach, the west end of Los Angeles and Venice Beach, mingling and interacting, communicating, talking, being in full, fresh dialogue with people, not merely casting my mind back in time, attempting to get a grip of what ancient philosophers would do, should do in a modern day position, but not being ignorant of that as well. Listening wholeheartedly to the possibilities that postmodern and modern and language philosophers, back to Russell, back to Nietzsche, not starting out with the foundation of Western philosophy, working my way backwards to them, appreciating the philosophers and the authors and the authors or biographers of great people. What qualifies me for office are all of these traits. I have been a metaphor of form, of regrouping the footing of my own body, of suffering the heat and the pain on the ground, and the sympathies and the empathies that come from the base of the population. Now, the majority of the population in the U.S. that has lived opulently compared to the rest of the world has been our middle class. And that middle class is being demoted to the lower class, and the lower class is demoted to the street. the upper class to the middle, as we know, and the income wealth gap based on merely trades, the trading of currency, the flipping of houses, the acquisition of properties for mere renting, merely an ethic of the landlord is these are not proper. These are not proper to what I believe. I mean, granted, we're free to do it. In my mind, to obtain large properties and either leave them empty or rent them out as opposed to sell them or distribute them to people, to families, is a type of uh, profit side ethic that, although I know it's big business and good business and legal business in the US and around the world in modern capitalism, it's nothing that I believe needs to maintain. Now, what to say on this? What to say about large, back to the cure, in other words, back to what needs to be done, right? Uh, if I was the executor in chief, I would enact eminent domain laws on BlackRock, an asset, the greatest asset holder, and Bill Gates for their lands. I would have the government come in and offer them a fair market value for the property, and I would take it away. And I would reallocate that for small domestic productions, small farms, organic farms. There is a strength in our multicultural landscape. Um, Peruvian farmers who, beyond and before COVID, would have green cards to fly up and work the farms in Montana. The general green card or day workers that worked in the southern states back before anchor babies and just outright illegal immigration became as whole hog and as um, domineering as it has. There's an ethic, and you'll have to pardon me as I wax over this. There is an ethic to the idea of allowing people, shepherds, farm workers, and other countrymen to enter our country for labor's sake under fair and positive distributive wealth to these people. And if some of them gain citizenship, then they should, in my mind, be able to further their prospects and their uh, acquisition of land and property and workers for the betterment of not merely themselves, but for their community, their state, their nation, and then internationally through philanthropy if one is producing more than can be consumed. So that would be one move, would be to take away the lands from these large attempts, I believe, the purchase of farmland. Um, I'm not certain of the intent of Bill Gates, but in Surprise, Arizona, outside of Phoenix, he's purchased large swaths of land in order to eventually build a smart city for the natural exterior boundaries of Phoenix eclipse the area. I don't know when Bill Gates intends to build this smart city, but because Bill Gates has obviously a type of imprudence to the um, diet of the American people and his relationship to genetically modified foods and the desire to move science into the further non-reclamation of organic foods and seeds. He prefers to distort the diet around the globe. And I'm really glad the European Union, at least in some respects, put GMO foods in check. Multiculturalism not only has a benefit, but a multi-organic biodiversity. Organic biodiversity is a base value system that must be maintained. The seeds must be distributed, and GMO crossover needs to be mitigated such that there's not a distribution in organic fields of more than need be the genetically modified foods. Now, I'm not saying there shouldn't be science done on genetically modified foods. I'm not saying stop that. I'm saying relegate it, make it tiny. Do not distribute this. This is antithetical to our human diet. This, along with the, I believe, new species, new gene codes, the advent of CRISPR, all these things, science should have a place, a land spot for such things, for these developments, for these curiosities of biotech, but not at the peril and at the extinction and at the diminishing the human as we know the modern human. We shouldn't have that, right? So eminent domain laws immediately need to be put in place for a type of national welfare. And I know base capitalism wouldn't agree with this. That's why I initially started off my party as the Cherry Picker Party. It is based on, I want to call it more of a string plucking party now. Playing a proper 12-string guitar or something of that accord. We must play the music right now. We must pluck the right sounds and enact and make actionable these plucks, right? So what has to be done? I have laid out and will keep mentioning this both on TikTok and around about. I don't have much gravitas online. I'm not a popular man. Some people find me insane, absurd, so out of traditional form that they respect me because I still can reintegrate into a reasoned sense. Because of our times, it is time not only to move politically, it's a time of action and grounded action, and not merely the superfluous achievements of the aesthetic, right? Not saying to give those up. Those are hobbies and lifestyles that I agree with. Now, that being said, the Convention of States, Article 5, could, I believe, the first Leviathan head to be struck should be at congressional pay. There should be a one-to-one relationship with the constituency's income and the representative's income. If someone is opulent in their funds prior to entering office, then let them, cease and maintain that general opulence for when they the citizenry once again. once they're done doing their duty to office. They're not to go in there to aggrandize their pockets and be at the behest of what big interest. This is the obscene. So that is that's the obscenity that we all suffer from the top down. Some people enjoyed Trump because he had great wealth, because he was opulent, because he worked the loopholes, strung the deals together, got Mar-a-Lago not for $28 million, but for some like $8 million, talking people down, renegotiating, putting stressors on people in order to gain his money legally, but with mob tactics. And so a businessman goes into office, and granted, he doesn't go to war, but he kills several in miscarriages of movement, yanking out of Syria in certain ways. Certainly, there were drones and deaths propagated by every modern president internationally, perhaps even domestically, but definitely internationally. But the point is that, granted, some people say he's a non-war president, but what he had done, in my eyes, was he fed another Leviathan, which is the military-industrial complex. Instead of going to war, like Bush did in Iraq and Afghanistan, as Biden is and Obama, right? Bosnia in the Clinton days, Trump feeds the Leviathan by selling, by first purchasing the military weapons from the military-industrial complex and giving them or selling them to Saudi Arabia. That is why Trump is considered kind of a non-war president. Now, I'm not saying everything he did was bad. By many measures, he opened up some fractures and showed some problems in our current state. But we don't need non-virtuous, narcissistic, must be treated with kid gloves and congratulations and applause and reverence from a virtuous commander-in-chief. We don't need merely a businessman to help us shuffle around and get the U.S. back in business. Not saying that business is not important. Business is obviously important. Industry, the maintenance of these industries are important. We all know this. We know that the pharmaceutical company withheld information so they could put forth these vaccines to fight what I believe were synthetically, genetically, gain-of-function researched and built viruses, one of which, COVID-19, took my brother's life in January, of which I believe that, as a side note, that the government's messaging should have been better for that crisis. We should have had the CEOs of Moderna and Pfizer in front of us, in front of the public. There should have been mass scrutiny of every account, and there must have been more voices other than one to wag the dog and wag it poorly, Fauci and so forth. That was not, in the modern day, a good distribution of knowledges. But I also believe that there should not have been mandates. I'm not going to say it's a my body, my choice argument, because we all wear clothes in public. You don't have much of an option to not cover your body and have the choice of walking around naked or on full fours or shitting where one wants. You don't have this option in public. But that is a different sort of right than an idea that the government forces you to perform something like you do when you join the military. I don't believe that what was pressured upon the people was correct. That being said, my point is we don't just need money men and opulence and pageantry going on as a big show in front of us all right now. We don't need that. Why don't we need that? Well, look, it's obvious, especially to the right wing and the critiques that are going on now. And I'm not saying the right wing, as it's currently going, is going to cure it. They're going to maintain something too conservative in the wake of this. This will cause a jackknifing within the culture. We're more than likely going to suffer some form of huge jackknifing anyway. Seems inevitable in my mind in some locations. And by jackknifing, I simply mean that the momentum of the current political apparatus, as its foundations, its footing, need to be surgically rebuilt, if you will, and repositioned as a pillar that the people that are governed can find virtuous and hence put their trust in. I believe that there is a preservation of the form of our way of being during modern liberalism, during the advent of the U.S. through the technological ages to today. There still is a type of form. And yet, as a cherry picker, as a plucker, a string plucker, I would want there to be expressions for people on the left, for the artisan, for the musicians. I don't believe that the propagation of bad tones leads to bad politics, like Plato might say, in attempting to optimize an ideal form. Okay, that being said, so we limit and restrict the congressional pay, then we outlaw all lobbying. No longer is Congress or the interest of the people being bought out by pharma, by the military-industrial complex, by big tech, by social media, by any general corporations or any international bodies that attempt to influence and undermine the integrity, the supposed integrity, or the integrity of the state's people that we elect. The body politic has to have a particular type of held virtue, and being able to lobby and buy off such that your representative signs off, votes for, moves their evaluation away from the best interests of the people, their own scrutinized evaluation and rhetorical and interactive dialogues and interviews with the public and with journalists. The leaders need a type of scrutiny to find out whether or not they're the best fit for the job. What we see in congressional hearings, side note, is a type of abuse also. All the people that are being asked questions that don't answer them in front of Congress. It's a real pity. It's a true pity. Okay, next thing. Something basic. We dislocate the Fed. I put something in the bio you can read on this. You dislocate the Fed, you eradicate the current U.S. national currency. It's traded internationally. We eradicate the value of the current dollar. We repeg it to a finite or a progressive step-stoning expansion of printing. Meaning every 5 years, you could expand the currency and print another $100 million, let's say, $1 billion, something like that. Otherwise, you don't continue an indefinite growth cycle. This is part of the abuses of U.S. hegemony around the globe. These are the abuses of the U.S. being a Saturn god that attempts to strip away and war with and take control of all the lowlier countries to benefit us in a non-virtuous way. If we want global equity and global trade and to still have the virtues of the American system, there is some depletion to our benefit, our hegemon as the world, the producer of the main dollar, which was the petrodollar. So now that's dislocated. So we know we're not on good footing anymore. The dollar itself is a problem. Everything is a problem. Okay, so first of all, you clear out these basics. Use eminent domain. You get rid of accredited investor laws. Everyone then has access to all investments that are made public, can go down to fractionalized investments. Education, a re-examining of independent, unaccredited charter schools for good citizens, not merely, I almost want to say a re-accreditation of education from what would be said esoteric, or once again, not part of a federal division of education. It would be nice if there was a base standard in math, writing, science, civics, so forth, that if one was to take on and try to persevere with a dislocated school system, I'm not certain to what extent that would be able to integrate with what we would consider to be like the hierarchies into the medical priestly class, something to that effect. But our current education system is shit, as we know it. Everyone believes we're able to get everything online instead of in person, and that and perhaps these distributed networks, as they are going global, as we are financially with blockchain and crypto and the internet itself, whether or not this is one huge, not a leviathan, but a spider that is milking us as an insect, is what is the negative phenomena that may ultimately ensue as we see the whole world wrapped and trapped and entwined in distributed networks where only some have certain access. And it seems like a different knot that's occurring. 14067, I think, was the bill in March that Biden signed to make a U.S. digital currency. Some have speculated, although I read the bill and I didn't see this in it, that would necessarily make all dollars digital, mapped not to an open lot of cash dollars, but down to every specific dollar transaction in digital form. That way, the government apparatus, or that's when we're really entering into 4D chess, is global economies, global movements of global banks being superior to the Fed and superior to once was a treasury of money that was given to the Congress. So not only financially do we, or would I, if you will, end the Fed, I put the Treasury back in the hands of the Congress, once the Congress was not at the behest of their own financial well-being, and their interests were towards the people and not towards themselves. So that would have to be ordered. And in which order would we do that? In which order would one want to do this? Now, my idea would be something quite drastic, where there would be a pre-printing and there would be a pegging to a public blockchain, not a hidden, government-controlled, unavailable code, but an obvious, public, scrutinizable blockchain, right? So we would print billions of new dollars. Maybe it would be the US Brawler or whatever. We'd have to rename it, and then redistribute and reallocate basically a great many funds. Most of those would be done digitally to just basically supplant where we're at now, so that there wasn't a whole creditor loan jackknifing and a complete dismantling of all banking business systems. But there would be a huge type of jubilee from creditors for the people as well during this process. And then the redistribution of actual cash would go out to banks and so forth. So the main point is that the international bodies are attempting to supplant the Fed. They've already got them by the balls. This is the case for years, and we know that. But nonetheless, they still are producing dollars in the U.S. and in the West that have benefited us. Now, that being said, that needs to be retracted immediately. So we're not international, and we're not an unscrutinized body called the Fed, but that we're an economy of the people, controlled by the people. Once we do that, things would just fall into order severely. Okay, beyond that, we get rid of money as speech. Money is no longer speech legally. That would be an executive order. Corporations would no longer be people. They would no longer be considered human people with human rights. They would not be protected in such a manner. Although those were put in place by some virtuous attempt for people, to want to grant a corporation the rights of people because they're legally sued as people. Meaning as a body, anyway, my point is, and I don't want to quite get into the weeds there, not because I don't know the definition of a corporation or how it's called a person, but because I don't have the proper grip on how to currently articulate why it's important that corporations no longer function as human people. As far as the Roe v. Wade laws, I believe we already have, under legal definitions of what personhood is, it occurs on the biological sense when the organism can live independently of the womb. So that's about 5 to 5.5 months. If anyone wants to argue that, I'm more than happy to argue it. That's where our current legislation is. I think the Supreme Court, by hearing it and kicking it down to the states, wasn't necessarily wrong in doing so. Instead of just trying to uphold like a universal rights to abort. Although I disagree with the states that don't allow abortion up to what is currently considered a person in their state constitution. And more importantly, in federal law, which would be at 5.5 months. So abortions up till that point. This goes beyond your ethics of the value of humans. And I've had 2 abortions that I know of, possibly more, or maybe I have some kids out there. I've been a bit of a rogue as I've developed myself as a human, as a man, as a wise man, as a rebuilt man. That all being said, patent release. There's corporations that are gathering patents, trying to gather values. So there will be I'm not certain what to do. If anyone has any ideas on what to do with markets, the stock market, commodities markets, crypto markets, exchanges, please feel free to give me your idea on this, right? My notion, though, is about more particularly patent acquisition and the non-release and the non-capitalization of patents, right? So corporations will pick up a lot of patents and they'll sit on them, some for strategic reasons, other ones for lack of knowing what to do yet with their patents. So a government division, and I'm a minarchist. I would like to remove governmental divisions, but I do believe the government needs to have its own news station, if you will, not for propaganda. That would be known. That would be declared by the government. We are attempting to influence you in this way, and by virtue of this, we are doing so. Beyond that, it would just be strict denoting of current legal structure and reiterating the details of the legal structure to the people. Back to what I was saying, though. Patents need to have a shorter release date. Technological patents, almost all patents. The government could hurry this, could insist on it, could overly tax a person who is holding on to patents for many, many years, conveying the patents to companies so that other companies that they might build a shell company and simply move the patent there to restart the clock. There would have to be something about the advent, the invention itself, the declaration of the patent in the patent office and its relationship to a timed release to all other people that wanted to use that patent. Now, China just inadvertently swipes patents, utilizes them, develops them. And in one way that particular tactic has advanced their nation explicitly and implicitly, and has brought them up as a world power on the stage. Pardon me, my birds chirping. All right. Beyond that, so some patent reform. Either bring it to market within a certain period of years, prove that you're bringing it to market, and that you're exercising it so that you can expressly get the advantage. Right now, these are all prescription. This is prescriptive politics. That's to me what a praxis of politics is. It's not just a whining and a description of the problem. It is a proactive prescription to politics. And so the idea that we put pressure or adjust or truncate the amount of time for corporations to hold on to patents, even to hold on to code, if you will, for indefinite periods of time, such that when it's convenient for them, some might think that this is a socialist, communist takeover and that it's a type of abuse. The history of democracy, the history of what I would think it'd be the most optimum, beneficent, if you will, government, most virtuous government, I think, should even cherry pick through social, democratic, communal aspects without becoming fully engorged in any one of those. Even those need to be in check. But the pressure of the state, right? And some people might, well, hey, you're less than libertarian. You want to take away Bill Gates' money, and we're busy trying to acquire as much money as capitalists so that we can acquire more things for our expanded future intergenerational family. unbridled dominance and monopolies over property, over exchange, over products like Amazon, distribution companies. These are abuses, and there should be somebody like a breaking up, or an attempt to either break up Amazon or encourage people to focus on alternatives, not out of force. Maybe break up Amazon out of force, right? Break up box stores. Uh, the fear of monopoly is not the concern. Obviously, there's some benefit to everyone going to one location, like the biggest river to float our boats down, like the Amazon in name, for everyone to go to Facebook. But these, Amazon has servers that now the CIA uses. So there's the government is integrated now throughout terms of service policy. So another thing would be to remove the government intelligence agency's ability to wittingly or unwittingly, knowingly or unknowingly, get into the data that corporations have by their customers' terms of service laws. Terms of service laws are for corporations. The mob mentality that the FBI and the CIA and that the government gets to get unbridled access to our data because we sign it away on the front end to these corporations, and then the privacy policy just distributes it to the government. That is, along with the general street cameras, corporate, Walmart cameras, food store cameras, street cameras, all these observational cameras attempting to gather and garner as much data on every individual, every vehicle, every item that it can possibly apprehend. This is only good for some AI utopic notion. I would rather have a Luddite process pressed on the people. No, take down these cameras, remove these cameras. You want your phone, fine. But another thing I would implement would be that all phone companies would have would produce non-trackable phones, non-recording phones, phones with no cameras, and phones with no collective audio, or at least lids on these things. Or they would come with bags, provable bags, to show that the data, location, and other things that were signed away by just holding the apparatus would be stripped away. Not merely some false shell of promise of secrecy and privacy that Facebook wants to put over on us. It's obviously horseshit. Anyway, back to my point is that the CIA uses Amazon servers now because Amazon is so big. And instead of using our tax dollars, quote unquote, to build those, we don't pay tax. Our tax dollars are practically worthless in an unbounded printing economy. It's merely a drop in the well. Really, your tax dollars locally might come back to feed your community, might come back for services provided by your community. But otherwise, in an unbounded inflationary economy, it's an obscenity to even hear someone, and it's not a truth, that your tax dollars are at waste. Once there's unbounded inflation in printing, the tax dollars are just a vestigial remnant of what it was once to have a closed, finite currency and economy. So the cry falls on deaf ears until everything is recorrected. These are such rudimentary bases, but in order to kill the Leviathan that is our government, one must chop at the shoulders and below, before the Hydra's heads reappear. Things have to be done in order. Things also have to be done simultaneously and in quick succession. These are just a few basic ideas. Anyone wanted to bring up any specific policy, like, current policy, government shouldn't mandate vaccines. They should feel free to distribute them, especially if we have known players helping advance the development and these abuses globally. Certainly the government owes us that relief, but no one should be forced to it at their peril on either side of that. Immigration, as far as the U.S., I'm all about building a wall, even a wall that has gates. I'm all about the maintenance of tracking and granting green cards and deportation. And this is not a sentiment about the abuse of people within economies that are choking because of the bad economic and geopolitical processes that the U.S. has put in play. I don't have anything against the blood of other people. They're well-meaning, hardworking, family-oriented, often, not degenerate, salt of the earth people. There is an attempt at ethno-nationalism and appealing to the Judeo-Christian aspects of our country. Now there is some aspect and reflection of the Judeo-Christian heritage that undergirds perhaps the philosophy of our legal system. There is that. But as far as a preference for wider Caucasian or Euro descent ideologies, that I don't believe actually has a place. It's not that it shouldn't be noted. It's not that people shouldn't consider it like an artistic taste in what their mating habits are in the communities that they would like. It's not about that. Though that is not for the government to regulate, in my mind. I am a white Caucasian, cis, I guess, even though I forget what the acronym means. Heterosexual male in Utah of Austrian, Croatian, German, English descent, minus any genetically exposed DNA codes. I've never joined or given my data to get back a response as to what my DNA history and my historic, possible migrational patterns or ethno DNA heritage may be. I don't have that information. I've just mentioned to you what I've mentioned. Anyone that knows me obviously knows that on this channel. The legal system, though, is currently, although like a tennis match where the judge is supposedly the referee and the defense and the prosecution are playing the match, and then a winner is declared by a jury, and that is a good frame. But the judicial system itself, currently in the U.S., uses a multi-charge for the same event, stacking of charges, and a prosecutorial advantaging system, meaning prosecutorial advantage is where the judge takes base evidence distributed by or given by the DA to the judge, and the judge initially weighs that evidence higher than the defense, making base preliminary arguments as to why the case might otherwise be dismissed. Now, the U.S. is the biggest single penal colony, with ironies of old plantations having great numbers of Black people incarcerated and laboring on old plantations because of the 13th Amendment, which I believe should have some revision, that people that are convicted should not be made to labor. The conviction and the imprisonment alone suffices. The idea of being able to multi-charge a single event and then use plea dealing on the regular, prosecutorial plea dealings, where the advancement and the pressure of the government to say, we'll dismiss this charge if you plead guilty to this greater charge. This levers of justice needs to be rechecked, cold. And by cold, I mean well, two things. I do think if someone is found guilty of certain crimes, that the judge should be able to, not override legislation in the state necessarily, but to grant their best judgment on what they believe the punishment should be, right? But I don't believe that there should be this pressure for a charge that, let's say, could give you 6 months in jail up to 10 years, right? 6 to 10 years. That leaves a lot of leeway to put a lot of pressure on defendants in court such that they would take plea deals and unnecessarily take plea deals. It's a huge abuse in our political system, our political legal system, and our legal systems specifically. This being said, this produces our large penal colony. This private prisons is an abuse of the government. I would outlaw private for capital profit-seeking prisons. That is not a virtuous state that has the prisons not paid for by the general taxation, but ran by corporations for profit. That itself can allow for abuses on the back end to influence judges' behavior, prosecution's behavior. All sorts of abuses just need to be gutted out at root. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm gonna wrap this up because I know I'm going long. And thanks, True Speller. I'll read what you wrote here in a moment. Basically it's cleaning off the goo of the mechanism of what we already have in place and rebuilding the engine and basically projecting and reprojecting a new politic. Not merely a new politic, a new advanced apparatus. We have an amendment system for a reason, but we're slow to use it. Our Congress doesn't utilize our abilities to amend our laws at the root level. That seems somehow to be something that always got held up or caught in quagmire, or the notion of a two mutable government where our supreme leader, our executor in chief, rotates possibly every 4 years at a minimum, or even smaller than that in cases of death or impeachment or whatnot, such that our country was actually built with the virtue of at least three bodies that kept each other in check, but also with the idea that we were mutable, that we were amendable, that we would, as a organic, mutable political apparatus, able to mutate such as to maintain a reflection and a will of the people, not as a hegemon to play the Saturn war god and take over and make American democratic liberalism applicable and forced upon the globe at the expense of what is called a nationalist or a patriot or a populist leader. These are not. If populist is a euphemism for a nationalist because we don't like the idea that nationalism means something, is a double entendre to, white nationalism or black nationalism or ethno nationalism. If we can't get rid of it's almost absurd. If we can't educate the population in order to see where the double entendres, where double duplicitous meanings occur obviously, such that one is excluded to focus on the other, if we cannot educate the population to understand such basic things, we have truly failed them. Now, our education policy, I like Ron DeSantis. I like the idea of not of dissuading teachers from moving information within a curriculum to their students to merely a whole feminine, if you will, appeal to the individual's phenomenological feelings, the feelings of the child. That's actually should be noted in silence and perhaps treated by the teacher or a counselor, but definitely with parental information given. The idea that the teacher becomes the state's secondary parent for the child, that's an obscenity. The curriculum, levels of curriculum should be enforced. Uncharted school systems that may have, this one's a difficult thing, because you could think of the Amish. You could think of private school systems. You could think of some audited, family, parental education, at-home education, some base curriculum. You would think that the parents or any exclusive body that's attempting to educate the youth would have at least an audit, an awareness of what's being taught. That's for another topic. That's for another time. It is practically time for me to continue a large painting. I am doing, this one is a little more refreshing of, it's a large version of a couple standing ankle deep in a mountain lake, having a kiss in the wind. And I'm happy to paint it. It's not twisted. It's not despotic. It's not foreboding. It's somewhat representational. It's a bit impressionistic, definitely expressionistic. And sometimes, if I was president, I would paint my own damn portrait, right? All these presidents painting after office. It's time we get an artist in there. If any of you guys are actionable, you'd like to join my campaign to elect Mike Fail is on the fec.gov, FAHL. True Sparrow X 1631. They said, "Believe in the Lord Jesus and you will be saved." Fine. Plateness, though. And well, I'll have to address that one next time. I better take a call. Thanks for posting that, though, Truth. So, how can I help you? Oh, wait. They hung up. Okay, I'm back again for a short bit, even though this has gone on, I'm certain, way too long. What I was going to say was I don't mind the Christian base. I don't mind an ethic that is reduced to Christ. I believe Nietzsche was calling Christendom Platonism for the masses. I'm not against the idea of forms and eternal forms and avatars and the idea of what is true and what is correct. I believe that a lot can be gathered through adhering to text and believing in a Bible. In Plato's Republic prior to Christ, it explicitly separates out what information is to be given to the kids, what fictitious mythological information is to be granted over to a child, and what sort of duplicity and secrecy is supposed to be revolved around that. That's in book 2 of Plato's Republic. And my point is that people can ode to Christ. I say I'm not a Christian because I've been overly imbued by I'll say the yoga of appealing to that which is greater, atoning for one's sins, believing in a type of afterlife, and then suffering all of the what appear to be discongruous relationships with contradictions and with ethics. For example, a lot of Christians are taught in the omnis, but Plato works through arguments as to what is considered the most beneficial aspects of a leader or of a god in terms of justice and honor and goodness, and relates those more as generalized tines on a crown, if you will, that point maybe in a similar orientation, but not to a singular dot. And I guess that gives virtue to a trinity, which I guess is the minuteness of the most minute pantheon one could have would be a triad. And anyway, giving different attributes to the God the Father, God the Son, and the Holy Ghost, such as to in one way align with the distributed fiction, the hidden information, and the hierarchical classism that structures of Platonism and Aristotelianism and other structures are built upon. That being said, once again, I'm not opposed to speaking on orienting things generally towards a religious notion, and yet in the U.S. this particular barrier of belief system relative to the state needs to be made clear, and such that religions should not be able to eclipse and overtake the state or be given a parallel power to the state. I'm not saying I'm the best man for the job, but I'm the best person I know of for the job. And at the same time, it's quite evident that I'm out of my element and that I don't have the base gravitas or the following or the momentum nor what would be considered CEO, high priestly class, managerial class, command over divisions of multifunctional operations that a current president takes on. And yet, I don't believe any president to date is entirely well suited to all of the divisions and apparatus. The federal government employs and state governments employ, but really the federal government employs so many hundreds of thousands of people that the administrative state of the federal government is so ginormous. And that'll be the thing that I leave you on, is so incredibly ginormous that it itself needs to be retracted and retooled. The IRS does not need these billions of dollars just to hire more people into a division that pulls finances from the people because the government is busy reallocating funds to international oligarchs. And we know Biden's corrupt. I think it's apparent. I think all leaders have been, giving their benefactors, benefits, buy-offs, monies, dog ears, to help their particular industry, and not in a competitive market either. We know that there's abuses, and we know that we're in strict peril both with our around food, military, education, supply chains, general overall health, all mixed in with the cultural arguments, Maloo's, the followings, and the squirrel mentality of listening and running to the next thing that pops up in our salient landscape. It must be narrowed. There must be a myopic and very focused view on all of the divisions, but even the most rudimentary ones. And that is my take on what needs to be done. People need to gather and start developing their own pressure groupings on state legislatures in order to enact Article 5 with 34 and then 38 states in order to really begin the cleaning of the American engine, if you will. And it needs to be put together in a harmonic, or at least a functional system. And obviously some industries like for-profit prisons will suffer, and they'll go away the dodo. Certain legal processes need some sort of executive retooling, some sort of congressional retooling on the nature of our legal processes. What is allowable to be done within states' legal processes. And then legal processes, even in voting, the Pennsylvania laws, the fraud that was disclosed in Arizona, I guess in Pennsylvania, the legislature was supposed to be the final say, their decision about if there was any problems in there with their electorates. And yet, I believe it was the governor, some other aspect of the government put in the judiciary of the state, I suppose, made the call for Pennsylvania, not the legislature. There's all sorts of problems, and they're state by state, they're local. We're currently in a water crisis here in the West. Droughts. We have some uncontrollable natural phenomena that also have to be attended to. I don't think that kicking carbon monoxide and pollutants into the atmosphere is merely a myth. Perhaps the degree in which climate change is occurring being caused by humans is stupendously great and can be mitigated and should be. But there's obviously possibly solar processes, other natural greater cycles of 40, 80,000 year cycles that we may be entering in that are affecting things that'll go beyond where we're at, such that mitigating our current concerns, our current methods relative to the environment may come in secondarily to the needs of the people. I might also say that the idea of governments attempting to put forth propaganda to limit reproduction for argumentative sake could be done if one believes there are too many people on the planet instead of, like Elon says, too few. We can't always over increase. There are resource restrictions and supply chain restrictions to the resources. And then there's government policy that restrict these bargaining deals, such that apparently now the US is buying oil from China that China has got from Russia, and so is Europe, meaning it's just a workaround. And the US has some untapped supply, much and great untapped supply. So our farms, our energy sector, and I'm not pro oil, I'm not pro big oil, I'm not pro subsidizing these industries, but I am at this state, I believe that the focus should shift to taking off these undue burdens and detriments that are obviously due to policies and implementation and abuses in spending and money that are taking and putting pressure, perhaps our total peril, to complete riotous anarchy. And if the elites and the global powers that be are attempting to deprive and subjugate and cause inflammation and rioting and hell on earth for our first world country, for our country, if that's their plan, and some chosen benefactor and their lineage will somehow dominate or regroup and not at the welfare of the world's population, but in some type of meritocratic or ethno eugenic program, it's such a pity to the sons of gods, if you will, the sons of men, the sons of women, to humans. We could go on and on, from industrial farming, basic agriculture, the abuses to animals, the abuses to other people, crime and punishment. Anyway, time to make more TikTok videos. Go to the park and sell. It's been about an hour and 25 minutes since I've been on. I appreciate any of you that have listened. Please feel free to share this podcasts this monologue, if you would like, if you will. I am open to discussions, and I'm open to anyone that wants to put any wind underneath my campaign's wings. I'm not merely a crazy man just because I believe I've been touched by that which is beyond. And I do. Thanks for your time.